Today, really, what I'm going to do is get in and talk a little bit about how to get more strategic with your stories you tell to your customer. And for anybody that has been around LinkedIn the last few weeks, I've been finding it very entertaining. And I apologize for saying it that way, but I've been finding it entertaining that there's a lot of folks that have been in the realm of QBRs and customer success that are just starting to talk about building strategic initiatives as if it's a new concept that you can do with your customers. I did my first ever rant in about 230 episodes, where we talked a little bit about, when did strategy become a new concept? But I think the key here is really understanding the difference between, what is strategic and then what is tactical, right? One of my biggest, things that I hear out in the industry, especially as I'm getting started with, with new customers, is they often think of the roadmap itself as a strategic plan. And absolutely, there's elements of delivering strategic services within that plan. But when you start talking about just your refreshes and your license upgrades and things like that, those are purely tactical conversations. They're not going to drive the business any forward in any way, shape, or form. We can argue it's protecting the business from a security standpoint. There's going to be less chance of, exploitation because we don't have patches updated and things like that. And I'm certainly not going to argue that being a reality. But the reality is the roadmap on its own is not a strategic plan. It's exactly what it said, which is a roadmap. Steps we can take in order to deliver on the services and plan a financial outcome. But outcomes go far beyond the financial. And really, as we move into the next generation of service provider, we're almost becoming part management consultant. Now, certainly, we're not going to roll up our sleeves and start getting accounting degrees and things like that to work deep on that. But really, what we got to look at is how do we get more aligned with the outcomes that the customer is trying to achieve? And by getting more aligned to those outcomes, how can we then deliver a technology roadmap that's both supportive of those outcomes, both in timing and meeting need, right? So, those of you that have been working with me, you've heard me talk 1,000 times about building a joint strategic plan with your customer. But I really want to go a little bit deeper into it within our conversation today. And then certainly we'll show how you can execute it within the system. Now, I always kick off with there are really four key initiatives in building a joint strategic plan. And when you look at that strategy, it's really to have, a few criteria come back to us. We want to have a better understanding in the customer. We want the customer to have a better understanding of how we can help. We want to make sure that everybody's in agreement and alignment with what needs to be done. And we all are in alignment about the outcomes, right? That's kind of the core to any strategic plan. It's kind of what is the problem and how are we going to get there to resolve it? So I always talk about kind of four key pillars that we need to do with the customer when we're building a joint strategic plan. First, we got to work with them to get the business goals and business challenges into the system. And we want to do that so we can be a better partner to them. What I mean by better partner is just being more aligned with understanding what they are trying to achieve. They may bring you goals that don't tie to any technology whatsoever, but it's still good to know that the customer's doing that. If the customer tells you, one of their goals is to reduce the cost of raw goods they're getting from China, that might not be solved with technology, or maybe it would with data analytics. But the point is, it might not be something you're going to be involved in. But it's still good to understand what's one of the challenges or what's one of the drivers that they're facing, so you can be sensitive to it within the relationship, or you can have an understanding of what that might do to impacting projects that you're trying to put before them. And when they're getting stalled, could there be other drivers outside of the norm that are doing that? So we really want to work with our customers to understand the key initiatives they're going after and the obstacles they're facing. And later, I'll show you how we can bring that into VCIO toolboxes, business goals, and business challenges. The second goal really here in building a strategic plan is up-leveling your perception. When you go into these QBR meetings, if you don't know where your organization sits with a customer, you're already behind the eight ball. You need to know when you come in, do they partner well with you? Meaning, are they achieving and managing towards your standards and moving with you as you make changes to your stack? Are they, staying up to date on the things that you're asking them for? Are they doing refreshes? Do they have valid licenses? These are things that, control, that we need to understand about the relationship before we can really go in there, enter in, and try to help. The other thing we really need to understand is, are we really being viewed as a commodity? One of the biggest challenges to the MSP relationship is when they no longer are perceived to be a value. They're just felt to be the hands and feet that fix things. And now they can be price shopped all day because the customer perception is, hey, if one does it, they all do it, right? So why should we pay more than we need to? So we need to use opportunities when we sit with the customer to really up-level that perception. If we're stuck in the commodity trap, building a strategic plan and then adhering to it and showing outcomes is really going to help drive you up the stack in terms of perception. Bringing more insight and, again, a little bit more of that business acumen can help you move up that perception as well. So really, it's a huge opportunity for you to, but you need to understand where you sit with the customer today to even move to that next step, and certainly up level your perception where it requires. And the other thing we want to do is really create a check and balance system, or at least perceptionally a check and balance system for the customer. By us getting more in tune with the initiatives they're trying to drive as a business, the more they're going to trust the roadmap that we put before them, because they're going to feel we really understand and they're being heard. So we need to, understand those initiatives to drive new opportunity. But let's take that even one step further. You're going to be pleasantly surprised that a lot of times when you start learning some of their business goals and business challenges at a greater level and get more engaged with them, existing technologies they use today can be extended further to drive more efficiency, more productivity against those goals at a relatively low cost, maybe even no cost. I always reference back to the Microsoft Office suite. There are a ton of tools available to you inside that license. But, and then there's common ones that a lot of them, end user customers use. But when you start thinking about omni-channel support that might come up as a goal, or better ways to engage their customers, can things like SharePoint or, Teams be extended externally and really help with those things? Those are low cost items for the customer. They already got the subscription, but you can show a lot of value when you do it. So, from your seat, it's being more strategic about the things you already support and extending their use, because that extension at low cost is also what builds a lot of trust. Hey, we're being heard. They're really helping impact our business. And oh, by the way, it didn't cost me an arm and a leg extra, in some cases to do that. And then ultimately, when we get aligned on what the business goals are, i.e. the outcomes, now we really can connect the dots back from the projects and services that we're positioning with our customer and really help them make a more informed, more confident decision about go or no go. So the joint strategic plan, that's a core tenet inside of VCIO Toolbox. Anybody that's taken even half a training with me has heard me say that at least once or twice. But the reason we're so bullish on it is because it's always been our strategic approach. Again, why I laugh at some of the things I see on the outside, because it's really to be to get that better understanding. And if you do it well, you're definitely going to fall into the category of being a trusted advisor, a term I hate, by the way, definitely overused, right? So, very consultative approach versus sales approach. And really, we're trying to build transparency. And, and by doing that, it's really that the customer is the hero of their story. We're not meant to be the hero. We're meant to be the Sherpa. So I got our friend Superman on the slide this today, because what a weekend those guys had, right? All of us wish we were doing 125 million in a weekend in our business. But all kidding aside, the customer needs to be the hero. So if we find ourselves talking too much about the great things we do and not enough about the ways that can improve the customer, it's going to fall short. And then it feels like a thinly veiled sales call, right? I had a big issue a number of years ago when some of my competitors are really positioning this to that low-hanging fruit, asset management only kind of non-strategic conversation for QBRs. Because if you've ever been a part of those conversations, and I was for 17 years, you would know that first meeting, okay, everybody's interested because they've never talked this story before. We show performance metrics. We show some things with assets that are getting older. Next meeting, we show some improvement because they've taken on some of those projects and some of those KPIs get better. But by the third meeting, all that data kind of looks the same. And you either start losing attendance, or my favorite thing, really they're looking at you saying, what's in it for me? So we have to build transparency into our process and really make sure that they're the hero of every single call that we do with them. And when we build the right process, we're going to build that transparency that puts the customer in control of their outcomes. And we're there just merely to help facilitate it and Sherpa that in. And that's really where you start building trust with your end users. We've all been in situations where we've got customers that we have great relationships with. We understand a lot about each other. We may even know about each other's families and all those intimate things. But that comes with time and trust, right? And if you're with a customer that you've never gotten there after 6 to 8 months of a relationship, either you're not making enough effort to learn enough about them for them to draw you in further, or they're just looking at you as a commodity and they're going to keep you at arm's length at all times. So when you start looking at your overall customer success, forget about QBRs, forget about fractional BCIO, but really just how you're going to engage your customers, you need to think about building a process that builds transparency and trust as well. And ultimately, this goes back to what I said. The customer is the hero of the story. We're there merely to be a facilitator, a Sherpa, a partner, bringing that together, but using our area of expertise to help translate it for that end user. And all of this comes from really focusing on cause and effect and getting to reinforcing outcomes. The people we talk to across the table from us tend to be business people. We're not working with a lot of IT pros out there, unless we are managing a large amount of co-managed clients. But realistically, we are acting as the IT department to those customers, and those customers tend not to have a CIO. And when that's the case, it's a huge opportunity for us to step up and fill that position, as you all know. But to do that right, you've got to get connected with them, and you got to really talk in cause and effect type situations. You got to go through your process and identify the gaps and weaknesses, the risks inside their environment, right? If you don't know what the gaps and weaknesses are inside your client environment, how are you ever going to Sherpa them to a better outcome? You still don't know what the problems are. So you've got to get a little deeper as well, so you can be more strategic about approaching that with the customer. When you identify those weaknesses, even if you're not doing a full risk management plan, think about likelihood and impact and be able to tell that story. It's one thing for me to go, hey, Frank, you've got an old firewall and we need to replace it, right? And immediately Frank's going to be sitting on the other side of the table saying to me, boy, oh boy, now they're trying to push some hardware on me. But now if you can go, hey, Frank, we were looking at your firewall. Right now, there's not an active security subscription on it, so we're susceptible because we can't get new updates, new virus signatures to protect us from the outside. Also, that asset is due to go end of life with the vendor in about 18 months, so we're getting near the end of its life cycle. Now I really want to start positioning to not only a newer firewall, but maybe one that has more services. We're helping them understand the root cause of the problem. What are the risks that they're facing? And then we can go that one step further and go, based on the current firewall, anytime a breach comes in, that's going to be a relatively high impact for you, right, Frank? So we might look at that as a 3 or a 4. But because this firewall is getting older and it no longer has the subscription, right now the likelihood of this penetration happening might be as high as a 4 or a 5 if we're looking at a scale of 5. Certainly, if we can move into a new modern day firewall that has the right subscriptions, we're going to reduce that likelihood of a breach like that. We're certainly not going to close the door. We never want to promise what we can't promise. But because we've got that modern day solution in there, we're going to drop that down to a 1 or 2, in terms of likelihood. So now the customer is starting to think in business terms as opposed to thinking about things in just technology terms, or you're trying to sell me something terms. And this is really going to help you, improve the conversation with the customer and probably get to the positive result you're looking for much quicker. But again, if you're not taking the time to identify the gaps and then come forth and share with the customer exactly what that means to them, and again, based back to some of their goals or based back to some of their challenges, if you can relate it there in words that they helped you build, it's going to carry a lot of weight, and you're definitely going to get a lot of, score a lot of political points internally at that point. And when all said and done, you're going to introduce that solution, that new firewall, whatever, but you're doing it in a way that now they can draw a conclusion. Hey, if I don't do this, this is what can potentially happen to me. These are the causes that are forcing Brian to bring this product to the table. And now this is the effect that we're going to experience. And at the end of the day, that's really what we need to do is reinforce the why. When you're working very strategically with a customer, you're not just throwing, ideas at them. I hate when people pitch A, B, and C options. And now I'm going a little over rant here, because what you're doing is saying, I'm not confident in telling you what I want to do. And I want to make sure I come away with some sale. So I'm willing to take a sale that might be of a lesser quality or of a lesser capability just to move forward with you. No, we got to go back and say, look, I am your technology leader. These are the things that can happen. This is the impact and likelihood of this particular service being breached or this particular system going down and not being available. And this is what the outcome is going to be: monetary loss, reputation risk, downtime, extended downtime. This is why you got to go with the solution I'm putting in front of you. And if you can't stand on your own and push that A solution every time, you probably shouldn't be in the room. Yes, cost is going to be a consideration. There's going to be times you're going to have to come down off the ivory tower and pull back. But why are you going to lead with a Chevy Chevette when you got a Corvette in your back pocket and the customer might be able to finance it, right? So we really got to look here and say to ourselves, if I'm going to go out there and position the why, I want to go strong with what I believe that they need. Then if we have to parse it back, I'm going to let them know, reinforcing that impact and likelihood conversation. Hey, this is why it might not be in your best interest to peel it back. But if you need to do that today because of budget, hey, nothing's better than something when we're talking about building a better protection. But if it's a budget problem or if it's a timing problem, we got to live with that and we got to work with the customer in a way that's mutually beneficial. But if it's just strictly a pricing problem and you can't get past that, a lot of times it's because the customer doesn't really understand the difference between A, B, and C. And when you give people the options, they're always going to take the easiest route out. So we need to reinforce the why. And we do that to help the customer make the decision. I apologize, my slide's a little cut off here. And we do it by being much more consultative than sales focused. So that's really kind of the approach model to, getting more strategic. I want you guys to think about cause and effect. I want you to think about impact and likelihood. I want you to think about the customer's outcomes they're looking to get. Those are levers you can pull on as you're moving through the sales process to make your points, to reinforce what you're going to do. And now you're truly being strategic because you're not just looking at it from a dollars and cents, what needs to be replaced perspective, but really looking at how to push the customer's business forward, how to better secure their IP and assets, how to make them better to their customers. And that's really the holy grail of all this. Hopefully this gives you kind of a little bit of an idea of kind of managing the process and the talk track and how to really look at strategy. It's not asset management alone and asset renewals. It's not just a technology roadmap, but it's how you tie the cause and effect, how you tie the project back to the customer's business. That's going to, allow you to be that Sherpa for a long time. And it's going to allow the customer to be that hero in their story and feel the changes. And then that's really going to improve the relationship and make them long-term with you. So I want to thank you.